Hey, everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Matthew. Today, we're going to take a look at the growth of the number of people in the world versus the growth of money. All right. So here I am back in the studio, just back from some travels. Was very pleased and honored to be speaking at BTC Prague in the Czech Republic last week. Moderated some panels, gave a lecture on Nazi gold. So do check that out when it comes out. And then after that, I was at the Oslo Freedom Forum, hosted by the Human Rights Foundation, where I can remind you, myself, Janine from the This Month in Bitcoin Privacy newsletter, and Nick Anthony from the Cato Institute, we are putting together a CBDC tracker, and that will be out by the end of this year. So definitely do stay tuned for that as well. So it was great, just to travel a little bit, interact, see some old friends and Bitcoiners, and meet some new faces as well. And really, really enjoyed it. So thank you both, BTC Prague, Matthias and Martin, and everybody at the Human Rights Foundation as well for all you guys do. It was a great little trip for myself and my family. All right, so for this one today, what you're looking at here on the screen, growth of people in the world population. This one's put together by the World Bank primarily. Sometimes I use IMF data. The UN, I believe, has estimated that the world has passed 8 billion people. That's slightly different than what we have here from the World Bank and IMF data. We have 7.95 billion people as of December 2022. This is the way when you look at big data sets, they're slightly different. But the important thing is to look at the trend. Okay, so that's what I want to look at today. So what do you see here? Obviously pretty smooth growth, but we see here 3.63 billion people in 1970. And then we see about 8 billion people in December 2022. So what does that mean? It means the population has doubled once and a little bit more than double in the last 50 plus years, the last 50 or so years. So we can turn that into a compound annual growth rate, as I like to do. It's the best way to compare data sets, to compare things, to understand the rate of change or the rate of growth. And I'm going to put that on right now. Now, this, you will see immediately, is going down. What does that mean? It means that the overall rate of growth, the overall doubling time, the overall trend, the compounding rate, the overall growth of people in the world is decreasing compared to what it was in the past. In the past, it was growing faster. Okay, so in here in the early 70s, we were around 2% per year growth. So basically, the base was smaller here, and the growth was about 2% per year. And then the base gets larger, which is the primary reason when you have sort of consistent growth. You'll have a smaller per year growth as time goes on. So that's the effect that's happening here with world population. Of course, if the growth rate was exactly the same, that would mean the amount of people would increase in proportion to the base. That doesn't happen here with world population. So we see that had about a 2% annual growth rate in the early 1970s, and by now the annual growth rate is only about 1.5% per year. But net, it still means that we've only doubled. All right, so the bottom line is we've only doubled the population of the world in the last 50 years. Now, when I say only, you could think that's a lot or a little. For people that are worried about overpopulation growth, it might sound a lot to say that we've doubled. But when you look at the growth rate of other things, and I'm going to show you another thing in this video, it might not seem so much. And again, to understand the movement of the trend itself, you need to actually look at that growth rate over time. And here we can see the growth rate itself is decreasing. It's still growing. All right, we see clearly with our eyes. You don't even have to look at the percentage. Population does grow on net. Yes, we have people die every year, but we have more people being born every year. Life expectancy is increasing, so on and so forth. Population does grow, but the rate of change, the rate of growth is less. It's less. It was 2% here in the 70s. Now it's only 1.5%, and it is decreasing. If we look at money, it's a little bit of a different phenomenon. So now I'm going to put up world CBPC. What is CBPC? That is central bank physical currency. There's 1,000,001 papers being written about CBDC. CBDC is all in the news. I just mentioned we're doing a CBDC tracker for the Human Rights Foundation. It's important to keep an eye on and understand. Yet, the oldest monetary instrument that is still in use today, though it is monopolized and only issued by central banks, is the physical banknote or cash. This also includes coins, but primarily people want to hold cash if they're going to hold something versus coins. So I'm about to show you is the global stock of physical cash money in the world. And here it is. Now this is on the left axis as well. I'm actually going to take off population and the growth rate just to start again. So still left axis, you see gross number there. But now this is in trillion dollars, where before it was in billion people. Now we're in trillion dollars. So about 150 billion or so dollars worth of cash in 1970. And when I say dollars, that means dollar equivalent. Okay, so that means dollars at this time, French franc, Italian lira, Deutschmark, Swiss franc, Canadian dollar, loonie, so on and so forth. It's not just physical US dollars, it's all dollars. And you have to go to the central bank's website to find this. What can we say about physical cash in the world? It is growing as well. Clearly, we can use our eyes. We can see that it's growing. So where we were, 200 billion or so cash money, US dollar equivalent, $200 billion equivalent in the 70s, now $9 trillion worth of cash. How much is the US dollar as a component of that? It's only around 2 trillion, a little bit over $2 trillion worth. That is US Federal Reserve notes, Benjamins, $100, $20, $5, $10, some coins. That's about 2.2, I believe, a little bit over $2 trillion in physical cash. Okay, the rest, $7 trillion or so, is euros, yen, yuan, Korean won, Swiss franc, pound sterling, so on and so forth. Okay, so it's growing. Physical cash is growing. Now, how do we measure the growth rate of this? It's a little bit harder because our measuring stick, our unit of account, is in many different things. I could just measure the growth rate of this in dollar terms, but that wouldn't be the best way, actually, because this green shaded area takes into effect the exchange rate of the dollar every month. What we need to do, and this is all done in the background here, I'm going to show you a trend line that actually takes the growth of yen, the growth of euros, the growth of sterling, the growth of yuan, Argentinian pesos, Swiss francs, all of these different currencies. It takes those individual growth rates every month, and then it weights them by their monetary base US dollar equivalent value. So in some case, we're not getting away from the exchange rate completely, but the step one is to look at the actual growth rate in euros, yen, pound sterling, so on and so forth. And then how important that growth rate is a function of the basket of the monetary base. So that's a better way to do it. And that percentage I'm going to show you right now. Okay, so this is a bit interesting. This is a bit different than the population growth. First of all, clearly you should see that it was much lower here in the 70s, all right, the rate of growth. And then it sort of peaked here in 1980, and then now it is about 10.36% growth per year. Okay, physical cash currency. So a couple things to say about this. Firstly, after the Bretton Woods standard fell apart, The closest data that we have to this, remember that fell apart in August 1971. Charles de Gaulle was claiming gold in the end of the 60s. The growth of physical cash, it can be presumed, was lower worldwide, though I'm not showing you that chart. I'm not showing you that far back. During the Bretton Woods times, it was lower than it was here in the 80s and even now, okay? Because you see that it was around 6-7% per year compounded, okay? Also, you notice the seasonality, as always. You can see it every January, every December. There's more cash circulating than in the rest of the year because of the holidays, because of the solstice, because people want to be paid after the harvest. That's just how it works. But we see here it is decreasing since 1980 until today. That is true. But it's just a slight decrease. Okay, so, just a few tenths of a percent maybe every few years. And it's not guaranteed that that's going to go down in the future. Okay, for example, we see here with COVID, there was a big push, even though people were saying don't use dirty cash, literally dirty germ-infested cash, go digital. They actually printed a lot here. So whereas here in November 2019, it's about 10.38%. During COVID, the peak of COVID, we went back up to about 10.5%. Okay, and then now we're down again, and we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It might fall in the future. The overall growth, though, itself still increases. Okay, it still increases at about 10 to 10.5% per year for physical cash. So what does that mean? Remember the rule of 72. Divide 72 by the compound growth rate, which you see here without the percent sign. So 72 divided by 10, roughly, that's 7.2 or 7. So physical cash has always doubled since 1980 at 7 years. Every 7 years, physical cash doubled. And it even doubled faster here in the 80s and 90s when it was 12, 13% per year. So cash grows. Cash grows, unlike what people might suspect with credit cards, debit cards, the introduction of digital currency, the idea that a central bank digital currency is actually going to compete with Bitcoin. Cash is growing at 10% per year. It's doubling every 7 years. And you can see that here. Okay. And it still is at a faster rate of growth than it was just after the end of our gold standard era, after the Bretton Woods era, when it was only growing at 6, 7, 8% per year. Okay. It's growing at 10% per year. That's a doubling every 7 years. So this is a very, very strong rate of growth. It's important to understand this. The doubling time, the compound annual growth rate, it's the strongest rate of growth that you can measure for something if you want to see how fast it's growing. Now let's put them together. Okay, so let's put world population back. All right, so that's the blue. And we see it's a much more consistent rate of growth, but then let's look at the compound growth rate of population. Okay, so here we see the difference. Here we can see that the growth of physical cash, money in the world, grows 6 to 7 times faster than the amount of people in the world. In other words, the supply of cash money, physical cash, which you might think, dear viewer or listener in the developing world, is declining from everything you've heard in the media and everything about CBDC. No, it actually is growing at a rate of 10% per year. That's 6 to 7 times higher, closer to 7 times higher than the rate of people. So the supply is growing 7 times higher than the demand. What does that usually mean? Well, price will have to fall, i.e. the exchange rate of money will have to fall. And that's typically what we've seen. That's why a sound money like gold has gone up and fiat money like every other currency has not. That's why Bitcoin, a sound money, has gone up and a fiat money like every other currency has not over the last 50 years. So that's all I wanted to show to you today. Just a little bit of a juxtaposition of the supply of cash versus the demand for cash, i.e. people in the world. Both have been decreasing, it is true, since the 1980s. But in the case of physical cash, it's actually a higher growth rate than the growth rate that it was in the 70s and presumably earlier. I don't actually have that data. I haven't done those blended growth rates. I'll do that in the future. But since the end of the gold standard, the Nixon shock, the Bretton Woods gold standard, those immediate years after, cash was only growing, physical cash, at 6, 7, 8% per year, whereas now it grows at 10% per year or doubles every 7 years, whereas the growth of the world, we double every 50 years. So hopefully you can see, in fact, a 1.5% compound annual growth rate, which is the growth of population, is much, much lower than the growth of cash. And I can assure you it's much, much less than the growth of many things in the economy. So I wouldn't really be too worried about overpopulation here. I might be a little bit worried about overprinting of fiat currency. And for that, you can see my other videos. Definitely look into gold, look into Bitcoin. And that's all I wanted to say today. So thanks for watching. Take care.